want you to imagine for a moment, you're standing at the edge of a day that hasn't happened yet. Everything is still. The world hasn't begun its noise. Your phone hasn't buzzed. The traffic hasn't roared. The emails haven't poured in. And in that space, right there, is your greatest opportunity. Not to do more, but to be more. Because how we start our day isn't about how much we can cram into the first 2 hours. It's about the story we tell ourselves when no one else is watching. It's about intention. You see, most people ask what to do to be more productive. Some ask how to manage their time better, but very few ever ask why mornings matter. Why wake up early at all? And that's where it begins. Not with tactics, with belief. We live in a culture that glorifies the grind. We wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. But what if we've been misled? What if the real power doesn't lie in how late you can stay up working, but how early you can rise, grounded and clear, before the world demands anything of you? I once met a CEO of a company that had gone through a massive turnaround. When I asked what changed, he didn't talk about systems or profits or personnel. He told me this: I started waking up an hour earlier, not to work, but to think. That 1 hour changed everything. I went from reacting to designing. That moment stuck with me, because the truth is, when you wake up early, you're not just getting more hours in your day, you're choosing to live with agency. You're saying, this is my life, and I will not sleepwalk through it. Mornings aren't about time, they're about ownership. Most of us wake up already in a state of reaction. Alarm rings, we snooze. Then we check our phones, we scroll through other people's lives before we've even taken ownership of our own. Think about that. Before your feet even hit the ground, you've handed away your focus, your attention, your energy. But what if your first action of the day wasn't reactive? What if instead it was intentional? Imagine waking up not to an alarm, but to a purpose. Not because you have to, but because you choose to. That shift from obligation to choice is everything. Because when you start your day with clarity, you carry it into every meeting, every conversation, every challenge. That's the mindset. Early mornings aren't just hours on a clock. They're a declaration, a personal stand that says, before the world gets a piece of me, I will give myself a moment of truth. And the truth is, people don't burn out because they're doing too much. They burn out because they're disconnected from why they're doing it in the first place. Waking up early creates space to reconnect, to remind yourself of who you are before the chaos tells you who you should be. Let me ask you something. What would your life look like if the first voice you heard in the morning was your own? Not a notification, not a demand, but your own clear, quiet voice saying, this is the kind of person I want to be today. That's what early mornings give you, alignment. And from alignment comes direction. This is not about becoming a morning person. This is about becoming a mission-driven person. It's not about whether the sun is up. It's about whether you are up, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, ready to lead your life instead of follow it. There was a time when I thought waking up early was just a productivity hack, that it was for elite athletes and CEOs. I thought it was about getting a head start on emails or sneaking in an extra workout. But I've since learned that it's far deeper than that. It's not about doing more. It's about being present before the day pulls you in 100 directions. It's about breathing before performing, being before producing. We've been taught to chase the how and the what, but real leadership, whether you're leading a team, a family, or just yourself, begins with why. Why do I want to rise early? Why does it matter? Why do I want to live this day on purpose? And when you answer that, something changes. Your morning goes from something you endure to something you craft, a canvas, a ritual, a space for becoming. Some of the most grounded, impactful people I've ever met start their day not by running into it, but by stepping into it with reflection, with gratitude, with stillness. Not because they have more time. And that's the invitation, to stop letting the world set the pace for your day, to reclaim the opening chapter of your story every morning. No one else is going to give you that space. You have to take it. It doesn't require a full hour. It doesn't require perfection. It simply requires intention. Maybe it's 5 quiet minutes. Maybe it's a journal. Maybe it's a walk. Whatever it is, make it yours. Because when you start your day grounded in who you are, you become unshakable in what you do. Wake up early not because it's trendy. Wake up early because it's a statement. A quiet, powerful statement that says, I care enough about my life to show up for it fully and awake. And in a world that's always rushing, always reacting, always consuming, what a revolutionary thing it is to pause, breathe, and begin. We talk a lot about leadership. We talk about inspiring teams, building culture, making impact. But the truth is, no title, no position, no authority can make someone a leader. Because leadership doesn't begin when someone gives you a team. It begins when you decide to take responsibility for yourself. Every leader you admire, every person who made a difference in your life, every human being who ever sparked real change, they all had one thing in common. They led themselves first. And that's where waking up early comes in. Because those first moments of the day are not just a routine, they're a mirror. They reflect the relationship you have with yourself. The promises you keep or break when no one else is watching. It's easy to lead when the cameras are on, when people are watching, when the stakes are high. But real leadership shows up in the quiet, boring, often invisible choices. Like whether you choose to get up when you said you would, whether you choose to start your day with intention or drift into it with distraction. No one sees that part. But that's the part that builds trust, not with others, but with yourself. And here's the thing about trust. You can't give it to others if you haven't built it internally first. If you can't lead yourself out of bed in the morning, how can you expect others to follow you into uncertainty? If you can't show up for yourself, why should anyone believe you'll consistently show up for them? Now, it might sound harsh, but it's not meant to shame, it's meant to awaken. Because the greatest act of leadership is not giving a rousing speech or closing a deal. It's modeling the kind of discipline, clarity, and character you hope others will carry forward. I remember sitting with a young entrepreneur who had just started her first company. She was brilliant, motivated, full of energy, but her team was unraveling. People were missing deadlines, showing up late. Energy was low. She wanted to know how to inspire them. How do I motivate people, she asked. And I asked her, how are you starting your day? She paused. What do you mean? I said, before you try to lead your team, how are you leading you? And she realized she wasn't. She was rushing. She was reacting. She was starting her days in chaos. So her team mirrored her energy. Leadership always begins with modeling. People don't follow words, they follow behavior, they follow presence. And presence isn't built in meetings, it's built in mornings. One decision at a time, one commitment at a time. When you rise early, not for the sake of being productive, but to be prepared, you give yourself a chance to become the kind of person others want to follow. You bring calm into chaos. You bring vision into the fog. And that starts before sunrise. When you lead yourself well, you walk into the room differently. You listen more deeply. You speak more intentionally. You don't need to dominate the space. You anchor it. People feel that. And yet so many people are trying to skip this step. They want to influence others without first becoming someone worth following. They want results without rhythm, clarity without consistency. But people don't rise because of charisma. They rise because they're grounded. When you wake up early and take time for yourself, whether it's 5 minutes of reflection, 20 minutes of reading, or just sitting in silence, you begin to lead with presence, not panic. You show up from a place of clarity instead of confusion, and people sense that. They trust it. They lean into it. Leadership is not something you switch on at 9 a.m. It's something you build long before that, in the dark, in the quiet, in the mundane discipline of choosing to honor your day before the world demands your attention. You don't have to have all the answers, but you do have to be the kind of person who is willing to ask better questions. And those questions begin when you ask yourself every morning, Who am I going to be today? What kind of leader do I want to show up as? What energy do I want to carry into the world? And if you can't answer that question, don't be surprised when the world answers it for you. That's the tragedy. So many people hand over their day before it even begins. They wake up reactive, they respond to text, check social media, scramble through breakfast. And by the time they walk into a room, they're already drained, already behind, already scattered. But when you lead yourself first, you walk in full. And fullness is contagious. Imagine a leader who walks into the office having already connected with their purpose that morning. Imagine a parent who sits with their child having already found stillness before breakfast. Imagine a coach who meets their team after spending the morning reflecting on what matters most. Those are the people who change lives, not because they're the loudest, but because they're the most aligned. You can't fake alignment. People sense it. And it only comes from daily discipline. Waking up early is not about being superhuman. It's about being intentional. It's about choosing to build your inner world before stepping into the outer one. It's about asking, how can I lead me so I can better lead we? Because leadership isn't a destination. It's a reflection. A reflection of how well you've led yourself. And when you begin your day with that kind of clarity, you don't just change the way you work, you change the way you live. You become the kind of person others don't just want to follow, but trust to lead. And that's where it all begins. Not in the boardroom, not in the office, not in the results, but in the quiet decision you make every morning when no one is watching. Will I lead myself today? This is a sacred part of the day that most people never experience. Not because they can't, but because they've never slowed down long enough to notice it. It's the early hour before the noise begins. Before notifications, before meetings, before traffic, pressure, and expectation flood in. It's the stillness before the storm, and it might just be the most powerful space in your entire day. That space, those quiet hours, are not empty. They are full of clarity, full of breath, full of truth. And yet, in a world addicted to speed, they often get overlooked. We chase momentum, deadlines, and the next thing. But what if the most strategic decision you made wasn't to move faster, but to pause sooner? You don't need more time, you need more presence. And presence lives in the quiet. There's a reason some of the most grounded people you meet seem unfazed by chaos. It's not because their lives are easier. It's because they've learned to find stillness before the storm. They've claimed the early hours as their own, not out of obligation, but out of wisdom, because they know something most of the world forgets. You can't meet the demands of the day from a place of emptiness. We live in a society that rewards the busy, that celebrates the overwhelmed. But noise isn't a sign of progress. Movement isn't always a sign of meaning. And starting your day with chaos doesn't make you strong, it makes you scattered. Waking up early is not about grinding. It's not about checking boxes. It's about claiming space for your soul before the world tries to rent it out. Think about how most people start their day. They roll over, check their phone, scroll through a feed of curated lives and artificial urgency. Before they even leave their bed, their mind is hijacked. And from that moment on, they're not leading the day, they're chasing it. But when you wake up early and step into silence, something shifts. You meet yourself before the world meets you. And in that meeting, you remember who you are. Stillness isn't weakness. Stillness is strength under control. It's not the absence of activity, it's the presence of intention. Have you ever noticed how your best ideas never show up when you're rushing? They don't come in the middle of frantic emails or multitasking meetings. They come in the shower, on a walk, sitting by yourself with a cup of coffee. Why? Because insight doesn't come through pressure. It comes through space. And space is what the quiet hours give you. When you start your day in stillness, you begin with alignment, not anxiety. And alignment isn't a luxury, it's a prerequisite for impact. I once spoke with a firefighter who said, You don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your level of training. That stuck with me. And it applies to life just as much as it does to emergencies. You don't rise to the urgency of the day, you fall to the level of your preparation. And there's no better time to prepare than when the world is still asleep. The early hours are your training ground, not just to rehearse your goals, but to reconnect with your values, to remember what actually matters before the to-do list convinces you otherwise. This is not about perfection. It's not about waking up at 4:30 a.m. and meditating on a mountaintop. It's about starting small. Maybe you sit for 5 minutes in silence. Maybe you write one line in a journal. Maybe you walk outside, breathe the morning air, and say, I'm here. I'm alive. And I'm choosing how I show up today. That choice, that simple intentional act is leadership, because stillness doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing the right thing first. It means listening before speaking, breathing before acting, grounding before charging ahead. And when you develop that rhythm, when you own your quiet hours, you stop being reactive and start being responsive. You move from survival to strategy. You become the calm in the room, not the chaos. People notice that. We've all been in rooms where someone walks in and without saying a word changes the atmosphere, not because they're loud, but because they're anchored. That's not charisma. That's character. And it's forged in the quiet. In a world where everything is urgent, the ability to pause is rare. But rare is where the power lives. The storm is inevitable. Life will throw curveballs. The emails will come. The challenges will rise. But the question is not whether the storm will come. The question is whether you'll meet it from stillness or from stress. You don't need to control the chaos. You just need to stop letting it control you. And that begins in the morning, before anyone else gets a piece of you, before expectations take over. That's when you set the tone, not just for your schedule, but for your state. You have a choice every morning. Start your day in distraction or start it in design. One leads to exhaustion, the other leads to elevation. Stillness is not a delay, it's a preparation. It's the moment where your values and your vision shake hands before you go out into the world. And when you begin your day with that kind of congruence, you walk through the day with integrity. This isn't about productivity hacks. It's about human leadership. And the truth is, you can't lead well if you've never listened. Stillness gives you that listening space, not just to the world, but to yourself. What do I believe? What matters to me today? What kind of energy do I want to bring? What am I committed to, even when it's hard? You don't answer those questions in the middle of a meeting. You answer them in the quiet before the storm. So don't just wake up early to do, wake up early to be. Be present, be grounded, be aware. Because once the noise begins, it's too late. Once you're in the storm, you don't rise. You return to your baseline. Let that baseline be calm. Let it be rooted. Let it be intentional. And the only way to build that baseline is to own your quiet hours. The world doesn't need more frantic leaders. It needs more anchored ones. People who know who they are before they step into the noise. People who show up clear, not chaotic, present, not panicked, certain not of every outcome, but of who they're committed to being. And that kind of certainty doesn't come from luck, it comes from stillness. From starting each day with the courage to be quiet. The storm will come, but you will be ready, not because you're the loudest voice in the room, but because you listened first. Confidence is one of the most misunderstood traits in the world. People think it comes from talent, from results, from charisma, but it doesn't. Confidence comes from keeping promises to yourself. It comes from doing the hard thing even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. And that's why waking up early is so powerful. It's not about the hour, it's about the act. The decision, the quiet commitment that says, I will show up for me today. You see, every morning you have a choice. Not just whether to hit